All to kindly take your seat and ensure that your mobile phone is on silent mode. We would like to respect our speakers who are going to join us on the stage and, of course, the audience. Manufacturing and MRO, next-gen manufacturers in aerospace. It's an absolute honor and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome each one of you to the day one of 12th edition of Defense Expo. To start with, I would like to invite the Chairman CII Committee on Aerospace and President Boeing India, Mr. Salil Gupte, who was named as the President of Boeing India in March 2019 and has been responsible for leading and integrating the company's work in India across its 3 business units, Boeing Commercial Airplanes, Global Services, and Defense. May I request you, sir, a very warm welcome once again. Next, may I request the Vice President Division of Russell, Texas, to kindly join us on the stage. I'm talking about Mr. Louis Pereira, who's the Wing Commander and is a Vice President, like I said, to kindly join us on the stage. A very warm welcome, sir. Next, a quick introduction about Mr. Ashish Rajwanshi, who would be joining us in a minute. Who's the Chief Executive Officer, Adani Defense and Aerospace, and has been working passionately with the ecosystem to set up the ecosystem on capabilities around defense and aerospace within the country. Next, may I request Mr. William L. Blair, who is the Vice President and Chief Executive Lockheed Martin India Private Limited, who is responsible for leading and developing a Lockheed Martin Corporation strategy for India and serves as the executive representative for the program's product and services in the country. A very warm welcome. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Chandrasekhar SG, who is the founder and managing director, SASMOS, the first generation entrepreneur, founder promoter of SASMOS HET Technologies Limited. A very warm welcome, sir. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Nikhil Joshi on the stage, please, who's the India project lead, Eaton Aerospace Group. A very warm welcome, sir. I must tell that Mr. Nikhil Joshi comes with an experience of almost 3 decades, leadership experience in the military and corporate domains, and a qualified military pilot. Next, may I request you all to kindly put your hands together and help me to welcome the Defense Head India Signed Private Limited, Mr. Ketan Makhania, to kindly join us on the stage, who comes with a massive experience of 22 years with the Indian Air Force in techno-logistics management role. Next, may I request Mr. Anand Bhaskar to kindly join us on the stage, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Airworks Group, and a chartered accountant with over 3 decades of experience in planning and establishing greenfield projects, project funding, mergers, acquisition, and Six Sigma projects. A very warm welcome, sir. Next, I would like to invite, like I said, Mr. Ashish Rajwanshi is here with us, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Adani Defense and Aerospace, to kindly join us on the stage, please. A very warm welcome, sir, once again. Well, next, I would like to invite, who is not here yet while we are waiting for his presence, but let me quickly introduce One more speaker who's going to join us on the stage is our Air Vice Marshal Sharad Kumar Jain, the Air Force officer, held several key field and staff appointments in IAF. Prior to his appointment, the officer served as Assistant Chief of Air Staff Engineering. A very warm welcome, sir. Next, requesting retired Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, PVSM, YSM, SM, and currently a member of Union Public Service Commission with an experience of 4 decades in the Indian Army, who has published more than 50 articles and journals. Mr. Raj Shukla has been awarded with Param Vashisht Seva Medal on Republic Day 2021. With this, may I request Mr. Salil Gupte to kindly take over the proceedings.
Honored guests, dignitaries, my accomplished and august panel, thank you for joining us here today to discuss a couple of topics. One is, again, this MSME topic that we've discussed a few times today in a few of these sessions, but another is specifically around how MSMEs and the convergence of civil and defense can come together to enable Atmanirbhar Bharat. We have actually, we're coming together at a very exciting time. I'll let some of my panelists talk about why that is. But we have today before us what I would call a proof point, a point of evidence of how civil and defense synergy can help grow defense and aerospace in India. At the end, what you see before you, this presentation slide, I'm guessing it must be on the screens over here and over here. This is not something that we made up just now for this talk today. This is something that we have been discussing with the various ministries, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Civil Aviation, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Finance, over the past year or so. This is a summary of why civil and defense needs to be thought of together in order for India to grow in the space for manufacturing and MRO. Why is that? Well, it's because in every other nation where they have been successful in building manufacturing and MRO and in this space, they have leveraged the joint scale economies and the stability of having these two industries together. They have created a joint policy to ensure the growth of these industries. Very candidly, in India, we are not quite yet doing that. We are viewing things through a lens of civil aviation, and we are viewing things through a lens of defense aerospace. And the reality is there's just not enough scale in either one of those to succeed on its own. They need to be together. Why is that? Well, I'll give you an example. Think of the last 2 global downturns before the COVID pandemic. There was a downturn around the time of the tech crash, 2000, 2001. And then, of course, followed by, in the US, the September 11th attacks, which put a damper on aviation globally for civil aviation. And then there was, of course, the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. Now, in both of those times, civil aviation came down. MRO around the world came down in terms of volumes, in terms of revenues, in terms of profitability. What went up? Defense. Defense stayed relatively stable globally. In 2013, 14, you had something called the sequester in the United States, which was basically an austerity budget for defense. You had defense drawdowns in other parts of the world as well. What skyrocketed during that time? Civil aviation. There's a certain level of counter-cyclicality that offsets each other between defense and civil. And that provides stability of cash flows. What that stability then generates is lower borrowing costs for the industry, lower costs of capital overall, and larger investor groups, people who are willing to invest to grow the industry globally. And India needs to harness that investor base if they're going to grow in this space. And, you know, it's funny that I should be talking about that because, again, I think we have an example of that happening right before our very eyes today, which we'll talk about. But that's one example. Mitigation of long, I won't go through every element on this page, but mitigation of long development cycles that we all know of occur in both defense and civil. That tends to be the case, but they don't tend to overlap. So again, that offsets each other a little bit. Very high capital costs in India. When you have defense and civil coming together, you have scale that justifies. You can actually get a business case to work despite that high capital cost. I talked about the complementary business cycles, and the research and development is relatively complementary as well. There are numerous technologies. We were having a conversation among some of the companies at this dais yesterday. There are numerous examples in the past where defense aerospace, for example, developments in engine technology, drove commercial advancements, civil aviation advancements. Interestingly enough, today, the opposite is true. Today, it is the civil engines that are highly advanced with the latest ceramic technologies, materials technologies, and they are leading the way, and those technologies are finding their way into defense. Again, neither civil nor defense would be as well off if it were not for this synergy being leveraged globally. But it is. And that's why these industries are advancing the way they are in the US, in Israel, in Japan, in Turkey, in Korea, in Singapore, all nations that take advantage of this. And finally, on MRO, Singapore is the prime example, where one of the world's largest and most successful MROs started as a defense MRO, grew into civil, and now brings those capabilities together to leverage the scale to allow them to compete globally on all elements of maintenance, not just heavy maintenance, but also component maintenance, which is something that we aspire to do here in India. All of these things are possible only if we bring these two together. And because MROs tend to be MSMEs in scale, this is all the more important for them because all of these trends, high capital costs, long development cycles, with all of the discussion around MSME that you've heard today, you recognize that MSMEs view all of these things as major hurdles that they have to overcome. And so leveraging the synergy is one way to do it. So that, I hope, lays the groundwork and the foundation for the discussions that we're going to have with this panel today. And with that, I think I will turn it over to the next part of the agenda, which I think is, who's up next? There we go, Russell, to come up and give the keynote address. Yep.
Thank you, Salil. Distinguished guests, senior officials from the Armed Forces, Government of India, Defense Public Sector units, and my dear friends from the industry. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, let me thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity at the Civil Defense Convergence to speak about what is very close to our heart is about the emerging role of next-gen MSMEs in the manufacturing and MRO sector. Platforms like these give us an opportunity to basically interact with all the agencies such as the armed forces, the military establishments, the DPSUs, to explore potential areas of collaboration and forge partnerships that will help each other grow. In today's world, it is more about collaboration than anything else. These partnerships will basically help to optimize utilization of each other's resources and to make India self-reliant in all areas of operation. Towards this, I would like to tell you how Roselle's journey came up in the last decade. We have been tightly knitted and collaborate. There was a lot of collaboration between our partners, the customer, for example, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and the academic partner, NTTF. We all got together and we all aim to emerge as a leading player in aerospace and manufacturing and MRO. Rosell, Texas was established in the year 2011 with a single-minded vision to set a benchmark standards in quality, delivery, relationship experience. The founding members focused on establishing a business based on purpose rather than profitability. For Rosell, trust account of credibility currency is more important than just the bank account currency. The edifice of excellence, as we call it now, is built around the four cornerstones or P's, namely purpose, passion, people, and processes. The company has spared no efforts in creating this next-gen company and has invested in thought, time, money, and effort that is visible to all who come and visit us at the state-of-art facility, which is an IGBC gold-rated facility at Devanhalli in Bangalore. Its forward-looking and strong operational management base, which was in terms of getting us certified to various ISO certifications related to aerospace, environment, health and safety, anti-bribery, NADCAP 7121, information security being compliant to NIST 800-171, and moving towards the CMMC level 2. Rosell strongly believes in the power of global outlook and has adopted the cream collar culture, having caring human resource management practices for manufacturing in India. It is focused on diversity, inclusivity, sustainable development, and energy conservation. Rosell strongly believes that one always needs luck, but this one must create it through hard work and diligent execution and be ready to seize any chances that come our way. Rosell created this through its commitment, competency, capability, and care, duly experienced by its first customer, the Boeing company. We work on most of the Boeing platforms, the F-15, the F-18, Apache, Chinook, KC-46, P-8, the T-78 trainer, and many other Boeing commercial platforms. We do a lot of work for Lockheed Martin on the F-16, the C-130, and the MH-60. Our other customers include Honeywell, Explio, the DPSU's IAF, just to name a few. What's more important today is staying ahead of the curve in terms of capacity, capability, competency building. We have our own training establishment called Rosell School of Learning. As an MSME, we have invested in conducting learn and earn programs, with Rosell being the industry partner, NTTF the academic partner, and in certain cases we had the Boeing company sponsoring these diploma courses. Rosell has its own facility in the US with strong teaming relationships and global presence. It has aggressive growth plans to further brand India globally. The path taken by Rosell, Texas as an MSME can be emulated by aerospace and defense component manufacturing MSME companies in India for establishing themselves as a credible partner with global OEMs. As we all know, the projection that India will induct about over 1,000 passenger cargo aircraft and over 400 military aircraft in the next 7 to 8 years, and we need to have an MRO system in place capable and to build up the capacity so that we do not lose out on the high civil aircraft and defense aircraft. As a manufacturing entity, we are exploring certification requirements for the DGCA CAR 21 and in parallel for the DGCA CAR 145 for the MRO activity. We are reaching out to component OEMs to create strategic alliances to establish the approved test and ROH facilities within India. Rosell has always extended the same level of delight that it provides to global OEMs to its valuable Indian customers. This is where we see that the collaboration and the synergy between all of us seated here from different verticals who can come together and make the self-reliant program a success. And actually we see progress over here in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you know, the Russell story is really an inspiring one because they have grown to become one of the leading suppliers to Boeing, winning numerous awards over the past few years in global competitions. And so it's truly a remarkable story. The next speaker I'd like to bring up is hopefully going to talk about a shining example of civil defense convergence. Mr. Ashish Rajwanshi from Adani, please. Thank you.
Thanks for the support. Good evening. This is late in the day, so I'm not going to bore you with long stories and why am I here? I think Salil was able to predict that we can play probably an important role. So an hour back, we announced the acquisition of Airworks, which has joined the platform. So thank you, Salil, and good anticipation. So what's happening? So again, good evening, respected dignitaries, industry captains and friends. And it's an honor and privilege to be talking in front of you about how we look at the country and what's happening. So there's a lot which has changed in the last 24 months. There's a lot what we have seen in terms of the implications of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, the outcome of pandemic, and also the climate change challenges which continue to we continue to face as a population and planet. So what does this mean? This means that we are witnessing emergence of a true bipolar world. We are talking about a global engagement and a disengagement, which is more inward-looking, focusing on self-reliance, de-risking supply chains, and a stronger nationalism feeling, which many are also calling the rising tide of deglobalization. So, and when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think it's an impeccable time when this is coming at the 75th year of India's independence. And this is a time when India is already become the 5th largest economy, on the way to become the 3rd largest economy by 2030. And this is a period between now and 2030, what many people are calling Amrit Kal, that this is the start of a beautiful period, and the beginning has already been done by the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, bringing us all together and galvanizing us towards a common goal, that how do we make India scientifically, industrially, and economically an advanced and a self-reliant nation. So. And I think what we are doing as an industry is, for the first time, we are seeing a whole of nation approach, a Team India approach, where all the stakeholders, all the way from the Prime Minister, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Civil Aviation, the public sector, private sector, our global partners, are enabling this local ecosystem, are actually enabling the Atmanirbhar Bharat motto and working towards a lot more localization and indigenization. But going back to the point which Salil mentioned, almost 20 years back, every time there was a conversation around technology, the example would be all technology flows from defense into civil. The paramount or the pinnacle of all this is defense, and civil follows. And an hour back, I was having the same conversation. And what Salil also mentioned, the reverse is happening now. So the number of use cases which are actually available, visible in the civil domain, and one of the key examples where we also as a company are focusing in the unmanned space, for example, drones, and I take the application in agriculture, I take the application in mining, I take the application in surveillance, I take the application in medical delivery. So all these use cases will actually help refine all these technologies, and this will flow back into defense. And not only flowing back, I was just saying, if I have to go for a medical delivery and there's a surveillance platform or electro-optic IR camera, so the data feed is going back into my control room, into my defense domain, while my medical delivery is serving my civil domain. So the lines are completely blurred. So I think I echo the sentiment. And the same is happening in MRO. And the example is we have huge aspirations of building the platform in Adani Defense. And the chairman, Mr. Adani, has always said, I want to build and leave a legacy for the country to give the best to the Indian Armed Forces. And when we saw what excellent work Airworks has been doing for the last 70 years, proving their mettle, proving their credibility to the customers, working with the likes of Boeing, the Indian Navy, and also on the general aviation and civil aviation, there was no better choice to catapult into this space what we have done today. And this is not only about de-risking the business model. This is the way, if I'm opening a civil aircraft or a defense aircraft, I don't need to say, there has to be a separate facility and a separate manpower, because end of the day, it's a single platform. So I think the convergence is out there, and it's a proud moment that we're going to be one of the leaders in leading this convergence. We have been working on the civil aviation MRO space for the last 12 to 18 months. We have a network of 8 airports already in the country, between Mumbai, Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Lucknow, and other parts of the country. And combine this with the aspiration of the defense, modernization, globalization, what we are talking about is a very handsome MRO market over the next 7 to 8 years. Multiple numbers out there. I think we can read the research reports, but at least what I read was 1.7 billion in civil going to some 5-6 billion by 2030, $2.5 billion in defense going to some $12 billion by 2030. So the opportunity is huge. I think what's important is a long-term vision. I think what's important is having the right manpower, skilled technical base, which we get with 1,600 people coming with Airworks and Anand. The support of the right OEMs, Boeing, Airbus, Safran, everyone out there. And also what's important is this is not about putting a lipstick on the pig. This is about building the ecosystem ground up. So not stopping at line and base maintenance, but how do we go up the value chain in engine MRO, components MRO, and reduce this dependence and turnaround time, which always plagues general aviation, civil aviation, and defense aviation. So very promising, very optimistic about the future. And beyond defense, I think what's important to appreciate is we within the group operate almost as a portfolio of 15 or 18 businesses, which is exactly what brings the synergies in terms of cost, network, customers, market, being the leaders in the energy vertical, being the leaders in seaports and airports vertical, leading the agenda on the green hydrogen, which is going to be very important for civil aviation in the future, and data center and digital. So again, thank you for this beautiful evening and a great start to Def Expo. We feel very comfortable and also very proud that this time the primary focus has been on the Indian industry. And we can commit that with the push, what we are looking for in defense and aerospace and finding the golden nuggets like Airworks, we can take this ecosystem to newer heights. So thank you once again, Jai Hind, and good evening.
You know what Adani and Airworks are partnering on is really remarkable. Just to point out what Airworks has accomplished over the past year and a half. So as you're all aware of the Navy's P-8I aircraft, which is a Boeing platform that's based on the 737. It's a maritime patrol aircraft, anti-submarine warfare platform, where the only place in the world where maintenance on that aircraft was done outside the U.S. was at Airworks. And they managed to bring that together over a matter of years. And at one point earlier this year, there were 3 aircraft in their hangars at the same time undergoing the appropriate scheduled maintenance. So it's quite an accomplishment. And so that, bringing the Adani Group's resources and passion to that mission is something that we're all very excited about. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Mr. Bill Blair, from Lockheed Martin, who will lead us in a panel discussion among some of our other august guests who are gathered here as well. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have some of the remaining guests make a couple of statements on their perspectives on the topic. Bill has a few questions he would like to start with for some of the panelists, and then to the extent the audience has questions, we will end with that. And those questions, I think, if you don't mind, can be for anyone, not just the panelists. Over to you, Bill.
Great, thanks, Salil. And I realize we're running, a little later than planned, but I think it's a great panel. And my approach was going to be just to capsulize what you had kicked us off with, Salil, and also working together on the Civil Defense Convergence Initiative with the Ministry of Civil Aviation, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Finance, as Salil had mentioned up front. When we think of civil defense convergence, I would like to just cite a few areas so that when I ask the panelists to comment, we'll cover that full spectrum. One is obvious, aerospace and defense manufacturing. So India's come a very long way in the civil and defense production capability. We have joint ventures. We have an aerospace and defense ecosystem today that is tremendous and grown so much over the last decade. And so that's both at the component level, major assembly level. You can see it in aircraft engines with what GE is doing. We're working with Tata, with two joint ventures, Tata, Lockheed Martin, Tata Sikorsky. We're getting to indigenous content level in these major subassemblies, well over 80%. And it's because we've been able to develop an MSME ecosystem and supplier ecosystem to both into our global supply chain, but as part of these developments. So that's one. Two is MRO. And we just heard, a couple of great examples. And I also had some experience even 15 years ago working when I was actually at GE, transitioning GE90 MRO to Air India when Air India was taking on all the new Boeing aircraft, in that case the 777. So the capability is here. How do we scale it up is the question. Skill development, and that may be one of the components. We talked to the Minister of Civil Aviation about the ability to transition servicemen and women that are retiring out of the services that have maybe 2 decades worth of experience. How can they rapidly transition and be part of that workforce that we need to scale, whether that's MRO or aircraft production? I think we're doing it, but we can do it faster. Startup ecosystem. We have a tremendous startup ecosystem, so both in the large scale companies, but also in the startups that are feeding into that, and whether it's in drones, other systems. We're working with Garuda Aerospace. We heard from Adani what they're doing. I think startups are part of that ecosystem that become the next MSME. And then when we think civil defense convergence, another dimension that I might speak about, but I want to turn it over to the panelists, what are those low-hanging fruit? Helicopters is a good example where a helicopter produced to meet a defense requirement can equally meet a civil and vice versa. I lost my mic. It's there. It's back. And then offset leverage. Both Salil and I have been engaging through with the Ministry of Defense and the evolution of the offset policy and defense acquisition, DAP 2020. There is still more opportunity because we have hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars worth of offset obligations from before DAP 2020. How can that be a catalyst, an investment catalyst for us to help drive the civil defense convergence? I know we won't cover all of those topics, but I thought that might be a start. And I'd like to open it up really from the customer view first, on my right and my left. On my right, Air Vice Marshal Jane, I'd love to hear, we've talked a little bit in the past, your role in maintenance planning as Assistant Chief of Air Staff. How do you look at civil defense convergence in both the opportunities and the challenges?
I think there is a great opportunity for those who are already in civil application to parallelly migrate towards the defense application, and those who are looking after the defense application, for them to see into the civil opportunities on aviation. And there are a lot of examples actually which are in fact doing both the works. Okay, I think among our panelists we have Airworks, which is looking after the civil aviation part also, as well as the defense aviation. So I really look from that perspective that there is a great opportunity for a person to look into both the aspects. Yes, the rules of the business may be slightly different with a lot of stringent quality control certification requirements, which probably a vendor who is used to the civil MRO or manufacturing, probably he has to slightly get accustomed. But let me assure you from Air Force point of view, yes, we are here to hold your hand and take you every step to see that our mission is fulfilled. In fact, you will be serving us in the return. Okay? So I hope I addressed some of the things what you brought out.
Thank you, sir. On my left, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, we've met many times, and your experience in both in service and now in your current roles, and how do you see civil defense convergence from where you sit?
So, civil-military fusion, let me just put it in the context of Atmanirbharta. Atmanirbharta is primarily about self-reliance, but we've been beating this drum about self-reliance for 75 years. What is different about Atmanirbharta in defense this time? And let me paraphrase the Prime Minister when he says that Atmanirbharta is about liberating the forces of innovation, energy, and enterprise from the scourge of process and procedure. And my view is that as we enter into digital combat, where small is beating big, agile is beating the dull and the slow, innovation is beating legacy, most remarkably in Ukraine. All these technologies will only come, they lie at the cusp of civil-military fusion. So now is the time, we have made a beginning, but now is the time to get, the military, the civil bureaucracy, startups, entrepreneurs, academia, everybody together in this enterprise. Because this business is becoming so competitive, it is not simply about acquiring platforms. It is about building those innovative technologies of the future. And that will come only from civil-military fusion. And there are examples galore, the most remarkable being China, where it is in the ideological moorings of the CCP. It's led by President Xi himself. That's the game. Look at what Turkey has done. In 2000, they selected a domain of drones and EW, and they built this wonderful Bayraktar company, which gives you strategic heft, global influence, and revenues. So, now that we are taking off, this is the way to go, in my view, to get much more ambitious about it. There's one last point. See when everybody comes together, what happens? MOD, government, the public sector is primarily about process. That's the way we are. When private sector comes in, it tells you that process is secondary, outcomes matter more. So when you fuse, this is what happens. So Atmanirbharta is primarily about civil-military fusion because it is primarily about innovation. And innovation will not come unless you have civil-military fusion. That's the point that I would like to make.
No, that's a great point. And just to reinforce that, when I was, my opening remarks, the investment is in the billions of dollars in AI, machine learning, quantum computing, 5G, in the civil sector, commercial sector, and it's probably in the hundreds of millions in defense. And so we actually need to harness that capability. Yeah, please.
You mentioned AI. Just see what the gap is in ideation. So even as we are talking of AI in seminars like this, China today is actually working on the data stack, on the algorithm stack, on the engineering stack, so on. And there are immediate payoffs in command and control, in fires, in sensors. So it's happening, already happening. And therefore, we have to really step up the game, AI and all these technologies that you use.
Absolutely. And so maybe I'll bring in another view. Again, to my left, I think it's Nikhil Joshi, Mr. Nikhil Joshi from Eaton Aerospace Group, and maybe that ties into some of the things that, that you're working from a civil defense convergence perspective.
Thanks, Bill. It actually does tie in a lot, but I just wanted to start with a quip that I heard just this morning from my finance controller. I was just asking for some inputs on the MSME challenges that are being faced in India today. And then I said, it's not just about that, it's about civil-military convergence. And he looked at me and smiled and he said, there's no better example than you. You've spent 24 years in the Navy and then moved over to the civil sector. So that was just a joke, but in a lighter vein, but also what you were mentioning, Bill. Coming back to, I want to step back a little bit and look at the more mundane aspects of the business, because aerospace and defense in general is a very harsh business environment in terms of qualification, in terms of barriers to entry, in terms of costs, and in terms of timelines. Having said that, I think it is important for the MSMEs, and I'm looking at the smaller businesses in India, to focus on their core strengths, on their expertise, because you cannot develop overnight the subject matter expertise, the IP that is going to be required to become a tier one. You'll be spreading yourself too thin. So you need to focus on what you can do well, and therefore diversify your portfolio, spreading it across both civil and military, because there's a lot of common ground at the basic levels. It is it's not just a need, I would say it makes for great business strategy. And again, I think Salil, you mentioned this, the counter-cyclicality in the defense and the civil markets. It helps de-risk small enterprises, which is an essential requirement. And at that level, you see a lot of convergence. I mean, the basics don't change. An aircraft is operating in an alien environment. The requirements, whether it is civil or military aircraft, remain more or less the same. I'm not talking about weapon packages or special payloads, but the basic airframe and the engines and the systems that go with it. So there is a lot of opportunity for small businesses in India to develop core competencies, to progressively increase their developments in these competencies to service not just the military but also the defense market. And while these systems are small, and I'm telling you because we make fluid conveyance products, essentially the plumbing of an aircraft. Plumbing may seem very mundane, very uninteresting, but when things go wrong, it gets interesting real fast in an aircraft. So it is very critical to do it well to be able to succeed in this market. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Nick. So I'm going to go to my right and make sure, I guess this mic is not working. It's back again. Okay, see if it works this time. Shifting over to Mr. Ketan Makania from the Defense Head of Scient, sir, at the end. I think your perspective, again, on civil defense convergence, and maybe it's in some of the systems capabilities that are developed in commercial that cross over into defense and vice versa. Where do you see that happening in India, and what more can we do to accelerate that?
Thank you very much, Bill. We at Scient, I am ex-Air Force and now working with a corporate for 12 years. So we at Scient have started our journey working for aerospace and particularly civil. And Boeing, an example, 15 years plus. Pratt & Whitney is an example, 22 years plus. We've been working for them and have done numerous projects, generated billions of dollars worth of exports for our company. Now, when we did that, a lot of learning has happened, and now we are sort of ready to move up the value chain. So what I see when we talk about civil aerospace convergence is, there is a value pyramid, and there is a top. At the top, we have a platform integrator, there is an anchor project now in front of our eyes. C295 is going to be announced very soon. So there is an integrator at the top, say Tata Advanced Systems, and we have a host of MSMEs, 5,000, 7,000 MSMEs sitting at the bottom of the pyramid. But there's a gap in the middle. There's a dire need of system integrators, number of them, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 25, 50, to do hydraulic systems, pneumatic systems, avionics systems, and weaponization, whatever. Now, when this kind of anchor project is there, the mid-sized companies like Scient are going to play this aggregator role. We have the appetite, we have the understanding, we have the wherewithal to go up to that point where we become system integrators. When we talk about MSMEs, they are looking at sort of government and processes and procedures or some incentivizing where they can grow from where they are to be able to make better quality and go up, once again, their own value chain and be able to contribute. So there is this gap which need to be addressed. And so far, we are always talking about all these things in sort of thin air because there was nothing on the ground. We are talking about, integration and all of that, but there is no anchor project. But with C295 happening, with having government invested 22,000 crores, I don't think there is anything missing. The stage is set. All the, the pieces of the jigsaw are there. All is that, we all have to put together, sit together and put it in place and have that picture ready. So this is how I see it converging in time to come.
Great, thank you. And, one of the things that, and I wanted to go over to Mr. Chandrasekhar from the founding and managing director of SASMOS. And what we haven't mentioned, which I think is a real accelerator for the aerospace and defense ecosystem, is, I can speak for Lockheed Martin, I think it's true for Boeing, by finding companies that can be part of our global supply chain and develop that and work that down through the tier 1, tier 2 companies here in India. Those are the MSMEs. Feeding into that, meeting a global requirement allows us to position for the Indian requirements that come up. And I think, well, there's many examples of companies here on the stage, but SASMOS comes to mind because you've gotten scale working with Lockheed Martin, Boeing, many others, meeting a global requirement that can then help position us as we compete for fighters, helicopters, or you can also speak to the civil side as well, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. In fact, yes, I'm very proud to be part of this particular panel, first of all, because it's good to see that in India we are really speaking about and creating an intention and an action for convergence of these particular civil and then also the defense areas of actually potential opportunities to build the industry ecosystem. First of all, as a SASMOS, I just have to give some brief to you guys on these couple of things. One is it's already an existing civil defense area of actually convergent where we are already producing for both civil and defense requirements of actually the wiring and the panels requirements for a decent size for the whole globe. So the point is, I think this is one of the Indian company which might have produced consistently 150 sets of aircraft wiring sets for Gulfstream, along with actually more than 150 sets of actually panel builds for Boeing over the period of time, and then so many of the missile requirements to Lockheed Martin. So here, why I bring this as it's existing, it is possible, but yes, it is a big subject, in my view, across the platforms for civil and defense to put this together, and MSME, when I get, is a most important part of actually nimble, like what Pereira was saying, that the purposeful organizations which can create this change in the culture to be a part of the global, but a very high-tech focused company to deliver passionately towards the expectations of the end objectives. See, because as an MSME guy, as an entrepreneur, the risk here is if you fail in your quality or in actually in ability to really manage, because it's a huge civil areas of risk that you need to really manage if you're really doing a design or even a manufacturing product. So the ability to really culturize the whole organization to such kind of reliability factors and the whole processes and then the skill sets, what made all these things possible to an extent in SASMOS, and still a long way to go. So my personal 2 cents on here is definitely this convergence is a need for the companies to create a volume. See, you look at any volume in defense, it is actually much lower than anybody can actually survive for a long period. So the requirement is, it is not an intention to merge, it is a must, it is a need. There is no other go. So basically, and then second thing is, yes, of course, as a company, like already many panelists have said, many things have established as a basics in many of the companies, whether it is an MSME, like a tier 2 system integrators, or even tier 1. Please strengthen them, and then there are policies to ensure that how can we really create a database where how can we use them well, how can we really create value through them as the learning curve can be reduced. This is my point. Thank you.
It's a great point, Mr. Anandaskar. I mean, the fact that we have to get scale to make the business case close, you have to meet certain financial obligations, right? And I think we started there in the beginning with Ashish Rajvanshi, sorry, and With that, I'd like I mean, because MRO is another, I mean, and Salil spoke to it too, to get scale, you really need to look across both civil and defense. And so I'd like to then transition to Mr. Anand Bhaskar, Airworks Group, really from where we started in this conversation with the introduction you had from both Salil and Ashish.
Right. Thanks, Bill. According to me, this civil defense convergence is all our mindset. It is how we think. This is a non-existent issue, but because we have been brought up, the elephant has been tied to a small stick, and he still believes that the stick can hold back the elephant. It's a pure mindset issue. On a forum like this, when people pat me and say, Anand, what a great job, MI-17, remods into VIP category, P8, you feel bloated, you feel nice. But before coming here, I went to Pune to meet up with the aviation head of Bajaj Auto. And he happens to be an ex-pilot of Sea King. And when I was very proudly telling him what we did on MI-17, he said, Anand, are you aware that Airworks in 1980 did a conversion of Sea King helicopters into a VIP category, and he flew late Mr. VP Singh. And mind you, the Sea Kings have to land on a frigate which is bouncing up and down, and therefore the mods have to be that much more accurate. And in those days, there were no CAD cams, there were no digital tools, there were, it was a pure, almost manual effort, right? And Airworks did it. So where was the civil defense convergence in 1980, And you look across the globe, I don't think this concept is, I've been to MROs across the globe. I've seen defense platforms standing next to civilian aircrafts, It's again, I guess, it's the mindset that we have been born with, and we are finding it very difficult to get rid of it. And it's high time we did. As Salil said, there is a huge opportunity in seeing that as together. We talked about rotary wing. Rotary wing, the military can help the civil, because civil, we are struggling big time to start a decent size rotary wing scale in the country. We have hardly any 200 odd helicopters, and that too, most of them are on the oil rigs. There is hardly any scale in the civil side. Whereas on the civil side, for the fixed wings, there is so much of scale that we are looking at. Look at those numbers, they are mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. We are talking about 200 passengers going up by 4 times to 900. We are talking about investments of $135 billion by 2030. We are talking about by 2040, that number going up to $285 to $90 billion. Come on, we're talking of a scale which has never been seen anywhere in the world. What to talk of? We're talking about engines which are hardly 1,007 engines right now. On order, can you believe 1,570 engines on order? More than what is the current base in the country. So there is a huge scale that we are talking about on the civil side, which we can obviously use it on the defense, and similarly on the rotary. So there is a whole lot of synergy if we take this convergence, lifting the wheel, if I may say, a non-existent wheel, if we lift, I think we will do much better for ourselves.
That's a great way to sum it up, and believe it or not, we're on time, Salil. I'm going to turn it back to Salil. I know I have a couple of other panel of members that spoke earlier in their address, and Salil, I think you wanted to go to a Q&A, or if there's any other things you want to bring up.
Not really. In the interest of time, since we were supposed to close about 5 minutes ago, I want to see if anyone in the audience has any Q&A for the panelists. Please, can we get a microphone over there? Okay, sorry, we're going to 6. So we have about 5 minutes. So we can take a few questions.
Thank you for a wonderful discussion session. I'm Colonel Kevin D'Souza. I'm an ex-researcher from IDSA. I've written a book on transfer of defense technology to Indian firms from abroad. And I find that in the discussion today, we're trying to pull in 4 different directions. which go against each other. One is trying to match up with China, which means innovation and futuristic technology. But we don't have the skills, we don't have the resources currently. Then we have self-reliance, which means that we only stick to what we have, but we don't have certain things. We have to get it somehow. And then we have national pride, which is also there somewhere in between. My question actually is of the void that one of the panelists mentioned, of the skills in the integration of the systems, right? So what is the possible solution for it? Can you possibly give us an idea?
I'd like to take that on because I was the one who brought that up. You see, what happens is, it's not going to happen automatically. The first thing is we have to achieve standards, we have to achieve quality, and we have to be able to do airworthy components, or systems. So when we are talking about, filling up the void, there are mid-cap companies like us, Cyient I'm talking about. We have built IPs on some of the very key products in radar and communication domain. What I'm trying to say is not brag about us. There are at least 50 or 100 such companies who have the wherewithal and the gumption, and they want to fill up that gap. The point is to fill that up. As I said, we have all the pieces available. We have to sit together and arrange the jigsaw properly, okay? And for that, what we need is some sort of nodal agency or a regulator who is going to oversee all of this happening while the military aircraft is being built by Tatas, let's say. I'm taking that example again and again because it's a done deal. It's happening. It has to happen, okay? Now, when that happens, let's say there is this nodal agency which is also doing oversight of this happening, and they identify, yes, these are the system integrators who are working, and they are likely to be, going up further up the value chain. That's how that synergy is going to happen. And in times to come, when RTA demand goes up, the way it was told by Mr. Anand just a while ago about the demand, the same 6.5, 7-ton payload aircraft is going to be used as 60 to 80-seater aircraft. So, I mean, those synergies are going to be tapped into.
Thank you so much. So the void actually is of this regulator or this agency which is required to look into this matter, right? So I had suggested in my book that we have the Defense Acquisition Agency, which is basically the acquisition wing currently, which is only into procurement. Expand its role into something like the DGA in France or the US, the UK have their equivalents, where they have a technology-heavy, engineer-heavy organization which goes into the nuts and bolts of each industry and their capabilities and the potential for skilling up. Not everyone's got the potential. Some of them have some, and take them forward. What do you have views on that?
Yeah. So when once this starts happening, obviously what you are indicating is going to happen. I mean, there are no two views about it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thought for my CI colleagues to take note of, and something for us to incorporate into our thinking on this as an industry body. Other questions?
Good evening. It's been an interesting discussion the last almost 1 hour also. I have 2 points. Firstly, the good one. In the civil sector, I've been an ex-Air Force officer. In the civil sector, there have been so many agencies who have been independently working for years together and supplying spare parts, seals, gaskets, Class C spares. Numerous of them, without the knowledge of the defense, might be the Commerce Ministry or somebody would have known, but none in the Defense Ministry knew what these guys were doing. They were supplying spares and they were the backbone for might be Boeing and Lockheed Martin or Pratt and whatever. So right now is the time that the MOD recognizes these people and bring them on board and ensure that they supply to the defense also, in spite of the scales that we've been talking about. That's a good point, yes. Second point, we have again Boeing and Lockheed and other senior people sitting here. Where are the scales? Right now, when we are talking about transport aircraft in the civil, up in the civil aviation, all the aircrafts are being ferried out of India to either Singapore, Malaysia, or somewhere else for their servicings. And in the defense also we have the same problem again, because the OEMs don't part with their technology. Even if they part with it, it is limited. They don't give you the spare, they give you the technology. There are a lot of issues. So yes, there is a requirement of synergy between the civil and defense, there's no doubt about it. But where are the scales again? What are the timelines that we are looking at from these top manufacturers in the world?
Actually, I could give you my view, Bill could give you his view, but I think Anand could probably talk about how we've overcome that. Oh, sorry, why don't we, let's do that. So let me do this. Let me start with a customer perspective first, and then come over to Anand, who I think can answer your question.
Let me tell you, this is a great opportunity this time, and you won't find the government policies so supportive as what is now, when we compare and go back into the past. I slightly disagree from there that, as per me, there is no dearth of talent. All it requires is to take a plunge into this area. You talked about that Air Force also resorting to sending the aircraft abroad. Let me give you a live example. Me-17 V5 helicopter. We have close to about 130 plus helicopters with us. And one fine day we decided, let's do it. We have been trying a transfer of technology for years together with Russians, and for some or the other reason, somehow it was not fructifying. So December 2020, our first helicopter with indigenously developed repair and overall technology, it passed out. And the next year, they made it the number to 7, and this year they feel they should be able to do another about 16 to 20 odd helicopters. Is a live example, totally indigenously developed technology. Yes, it takes some time. See, we have acquired something, we have learned over a period of time, and it is a time now to make use of it and move ahead. And that is what is the expectations from the industries who are already doing something. Like a fine example was automotive engineering, already doing some of the seals, and probably they have to slightly improvise and make a high quality seals for the aviation industries. And let me tell you, today, MSME, we talking about emerging role, as per me, they have already emerged. They only need to be harnessed to find a global imprint. They're doing well. Some amount of hand-holding, some of the testing requirements, which probably is not available within the country. I'm sure when times to come, we should be able to sort out that also. So it's a golden opportunity, with the government very supportive, with so much of avenues coming all over, like C295 is one of the examples, which will really give a lot of opportunity to a lot of industries, and also the academia and the various organizations like NAL, DMRL, NML, and things like that, to further, and HAL, of course. Okay, combined with the pool of industries what we have in the country, and mostly MSME. Let me tell you what we are today in Indian Air Force. Our 95% of the volume indigenization is by MSMEs. They have done a yeoman job for us. Thank you. And I totally agree with Mr. Anand that it is all in the mind. This convergence of civil and defense is all in the mind. It's all matter of taking plunge and getting into it. I'm sure we'll be able to solve. You see such an amount of pool of persons who are coming out from Air Force, from Navy, from Army, from HAL. Such amount of pools are there. And what capability the industries is failing to recognize, it is recognized by sectors like banking. They're taking technicians by both hands to serve the banking sector. And they're wonderful technicians, having spent 7 years to 20 years, even officers from short service commission of 10 years, 14 years, down to permanent commission officers, who because of some reason have thought of quitting the service and looking beyond. I'm sure if all their skills are harnessed, we are in right track and we'll do wonderfully well in the times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Air Vice Marshal. Coming back to that question also, I mentioned earlier the P8I was previously only done in the United States. I'm sure many people said the same thing to you, Anand. You can't do that maintenance. The United States government will never let you do that in India. Boeing will never let you do that in India. What happened?
Right. Thanks, Salil. I want to correct this misnomer which is there. Unfortunately, on Google, there is no life for any information which gets onto it. And people, when they Google out, they still see 10 years back data and form a view. In the last 7 years, a lot of things have happened. Now, no aircrafts are going out of the country for maintenance. I still go to forum where people say, oh, it is going to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is where it is today. And it is very difficult for Sri Lanka to service Indian aircrafts, of that scale. So those aircrafts are all getting maintained in the country. Is it hunky-dory? No, it is not hunky-dory. We still have lot more steps to take. Engine is there, components there. Rajvanshi talked about it. Those are areas that we need to get into, and that's not because of capability. That's because of technology transfer, and a lot of efforts are happening out there. Airworks balance sheet, 25 to 28% of our revenue is dollar denominated. That means we are doing not just for Indian carriers, but we are attracting global players into the country. So that, we are still looking at 10 years back when we say that aircrafts, a lot of things have changed. Now, right from UAE to Vietnam, aircrafts are coming to the country, and not just Airworks. There are other MROs in the country who are doing the maintenance for that. So we are slowly but steadily emerging as the MRO base for Southeast Asia.
I think Lieutenant General Shukla had a couple.
I just wanted to make one a point for the consideration of everyone. See, while I quite appreciate the conversation, which is about the remarkable strides that we are making in indigenizing current inventory, but the great possibility is that this current inventory in the next war, or even in Ukraine, they are proving to be legacy platforms. So the real challenge here is, and I would once again make this point, that civil-military fusion is about stepping up the game, and how, through cultural transitions, for the military and the industry, the old talent pipelines will not do. You will need have limited orders to place. Or you invest in a HIMAR, which is a composite platform of the, a platform and ammunition, which hits in such precise ways. And today there's an exploding market for the HIMARs. Now, the level at which our system is today, it may be a little premature, but we seriously have to think about this. And if we think about this, I think there is a great opportunity in defense.
I do want to turn just to close out here, I do want to turn to the man to my right and ask him, because, look, we have companies of all different sizes here, but there are certain companies that aspire to not just become giants of Indian aerospace, but giants of global defense and aerospace. And so I have to ask you, Ashish, based on what you've heard here today, do you think this type of collaboration can help drive innovation at a company like Adani to achieve that global aspiration?
So, very interesting discussion over the last 45 minutes. Salil, very clearly, we pick up services, we pick up manufacturing, we pick up MRO. I don't think we can talk about an industry in a local ecosystem. Yeah, every ecosystem is more global. So the point which has been made on innovation is absolutely apt, that it's not about the status quo, it's actually how do we continue to innovate, keeping in mind the customer requirements, keeping in mind the digital evolution which is happening out there, and even the whole way people are going to travel in the future. Yeah, we are talking about helicopters and fighter crafts today. Tomorrow it's going to be unmanned aircrafts. So the MRO requirements there would be very different from the MRO requirements what we have today. We are talking about hyperloops. Yeah, so we cannot continue to talk about rail MRO or car MRO. So I think what's important is this is literally becoming the, rather than an afterthought, this has to be integral part, that along with the services we are providing, we have almost the collaborations we are discussing either between academia, industry, customer, partners, and on an ongoing basis continue to provide newer and more innovative solutions, without which all of us will become obsolete very, very fast. So the same is happening in terms of the innovation in Boeing and Lockheed Martin's portfolio. The same needs to happen in the MRO industry. The same needs to happen in the services industry. So for us, this is just a starting point. The vision is very clearly to make India the regional hub for MRO going forward. The convergence is not only about civil and defense. The convergence is about services, because for me it's a services industry, not an MRO industry. So why not training? Why not simulation? Why not the peripheral adjacent services which are going to be important for this whole ecosystem? And I think give us a couple of years and we will deliver to your expectations. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing it. And I think with that, we'll close for the day, and I thank all of you for joining us.
To start with, thank you so much, Mr. Salil Gupte, for moderating this session, and all our esteemed panelists who joined us on the stage. With this, we'll have one group picture, because I'm not sure if we're going to get this moment again, all the brilliant minds under one roof on the one stage. And for the convenience of our audience in the house, we have coffee and tea. Please feel free to join us for the tea and coffee session, which will help you to connect offline with all the esteemed panelists who joined us and ask your questions. Thank you so much. Thank you.